First sponsor I want to shout out, of course, is Phenomenal Finds ATL. If you're looking for anything retro from The Simpsons to pro wrestling to anything old school, check out phenomenalfindsatl.com. We also want to thank our partners, Triple Crown Wrestling and Ultimate Championship Wrestling, for bringing back professional wrestling as it should be to the state of Kentucky. And we also want to thank our sponsor, Les Murphy Painting. If you have any issues with your painting inside or outside, contact Les Murphy at 734-334-3702. Now, today, we have a very special guest from MLW Con-Fusion. Ladies and gentlemen, Rob K. Rob, welcome to the Joe Monroe Show, my friend.
Hey, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Hey, not a problem at all. So we just met, when we met, just a couple months ago?
Something like that. It's been...
Okay, so it's pretty cool to have you on here. Welcome to the show. Go ahead, if you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself, go ahead and I'll get you in a single spot here.
All right. Yeah, I'm Rob Kemmer, the host of MLW Con-Fusion, usually bringing you all that you may or may not need to know about Major League Wrestling and its television programming. We focus on Major League Wrestling, drops every Friday through Spotify for podcasters, or wherever you happen to get your podcasts from. I'm available on most podcasting platforms there. Also a contributor to the Urban Wrestling Network. We drop YouTube episodes whenever MLW does a big show, and then also I'm a contributing independent wrestling writer for We Like Sports. .com as well. This is, of course, in addition to being a lifelong professional wrestling fan, with, we'll call it like nearly 40 years of professional wrestling fandom experience.
That's great. So MLW, it's one of the most well-known independent wrestling promotions. A lot of legendary wrestlers such as Dusty Rhodes and such have came through MLW, from my knowledge. So what got you started doing the podcast on MLW?
Originally, like in terms of podcasting, I was trying to find something to further, I guess we'll call it, progress my love of professional wrestling, kind of like have an extra outlet for wrestling, because I'm not a wrestler. I'm not a wrestling personality per se. I'm not a manager, commentator, etc. So I was just looking for another creative outlet just to be able to express my fandom, besides just being another one of those people that just type away on the internet and complain about matches and all that sort of good stuff. Major League Wrestling came into my periphery. They had just relaunched the promotion like the year prior to my podcast forming. But I was... The short version is that I had stopped being in love with the WWE. Like, I just, creative wasn't doing it for me, in my opinion. Like, at the time, Roman Reigns, well, it's definitely not the tribal chief he is now, and like the creative surrounding him I thought was terrible. I've never been a big fan of Brock Lesnar's creative, and he had just won the Money in the Bank briefcase in a way that, as a fan, upset me. So I was looking, in addition to looking for a creative wrestling outlet, I was looking for something else in the realm of professional wrestling. And at the time, AEW had not existed yet. So I really made it a point to kind of like delve into the realm of independent wrestling. And MLW kind of caught my eye because they had these guys that were kind of up and coming. They had a fairly consistent weekly wrestling product. So as someone who's looking to put out a wrestling product of their own, it was great because it gave me something to review every week. So I didn't have to take like monthly breaks, because a lot of wrestling promotions run just once a month. Or I didn't have to like, really, dig deep to find something that, would set me apart from everyone else. Because a lot of wrestling podcasters either focus on the WWE and now AEW as well, or they just do, here's our wrestling news of the week. And in addition to being, I wanted to set myself away, a little bit separate from the pack on there, and just like, let's just focus on something, that's going to be constant, but is also not the big leagues. Like, let's talk about some news that are going to fly underneath the radar, because there's a whole world of professional wrestling that isn't the WWE. And so that started near about 4.5 years ago. And I've stuck with MLW through its ups and downs, all the way through the pandemic, when we didn't know wrestling was, if wrestling in its current format was going to, ever come back, to, their various attempts to rebrand via Azteca Lucha, or just what they're doing now with the kind of like relaunch of the company, doing almost like a pay-per-view exclusive model, or a big event model, where they're working bi-weekly, big event on Triller, formerly Fight TV, and a big event on YouTube as well.
Yeah, when I seen your show, I was like, wow, someone's actually covering AEW pretty consistent, not AEW, but MLW pretty consistently. And I knew of MLW way before, like you said, AEW came to the fold, because that's where I was kind of introduced to MJF. And I was introduced to people like Contra Unit, stuff like that. I thought that was pretty cool. That's something MLW was doing, and that's what was drawing my attention. I'm like, well, they're very lesser known, but they're pulling in more stuff than what mainstream WWE is doing right now. So I thought that was pretty cool, and that's pretty cool that you caught up on it as well. So was you able to interview anybody from MLW as of yet? Well, who's your most notable one?
In terms of MLW, I'm not gonna lie, I don't do many interviews, and when I do, I've just kind of I accept whoever's been willing to come upon the show. Though in terms of MLW, the Pride of Joy is having, at the time, she was the featherweight champion, and the WXW Women's champion Del Miexo, had her on the show for a fun interview. But that was like the name of MLW that I've gotten to work with directly in formats of the interviews, though I've had a handful of very public spats with now former MLW tag team champion, the One Called Manders, as well.
That would be interesting to see. I have to look that up. But my favorite one out of MLW is Alexander Hammerstone, which he was in MLW for a long time, and just recently left to pursue other things. Who would you say would be probably your favorite out of MLW?
I am a big supporter of Alex Kane. I've liked a lot of the work that he's put in since he's debuted for the company, and obviously the company's kind of all gotten behind him as well, being a former champion in and of itself. Though I'm not going to lie that in present time, like in this exact moment, I am a giant fanboy for Satoshi Kojima. So it warms my little bread club heart to see him being world champion. And selfishly, I'm hoping he holds the title at least through May, because I will be in attendance at the Azteca Lucha show in Cicero, May 11th, I believe it is.
And I heard that's going to be one heck of an event. I try to follow everything the best I could, apart from what I have to cover. So it's kind of hectic. But yeah, MLW is one of those promotions that not still to this day, not many people know about. I think it's more well known now than it was, say, 4 years ago when you started watching it. Because that's about the time I started watching it too. It was like literally, I think it was about a year before AEW started coming into the fold is when I started watching MLW. Roughly about a year. So that, again, it's pretty cool that you're covering MLW. I asked this, I'm going to start asking this for everybody that comes on the show. What is your goal for your show? Like what's kind of like a 5-year plan? What do you see in the future for MLW Con-Fusion?
Like ultimately, like everyone else's side hustle, like I would love to make this like my primary hustle, and I do have to acknowledge that I'm going to have to expand past MLW to do that. But for the time being, like right now, I'm focused on MLW, though they've allowed their broadcast schedule has allowed me to branch out a little bit. So obviously, like I'm pulling in interviews periodically, kind of as as I kind of see fit in terms of my real work schedule. So actually, spoiler alert, before I hopped on this show, I just finished an interview with the Marionette Noelle Summit, who's working primarily in Rocky Mountain Pro out of Colorado, but she's also appeared in, I believe she said, like 10 different states. Is popping up in Mid-American Wrestling in Arkansas. She's worked in Illinois for Honor Among Wrestling as well. So that's going to be dropping as a special episode Thursday. But in addition, but just the interviews in general. And then because MLW's gone every other week and I really like putting on a weekly product, I've tried to give back to the independent wrestling community. So I've been kind of like cherry picking independent wrestling events and television shows as they've come kind of across my timeline, to give them what I'm calling the indie wrestling spotlight. So that's kind of going on like bi-weekly on the weeks that MLW doesn't go forth. So I'm indirectly already kind of expanding my empire, but I would like to expand it in a way that's financially viable for myself too, to make that my primary income, and my primary gig is doing these podcasts, or being, we'll say, a public broadcaster in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's all of our
right. The grind is real.
Yes, trust me. I been doing this full time since October, and I tell everybody it's a second job because it feels like it sometimes. But I love it. I love doing this, and I love that you have agreed to be part of the Podcasters Appreciation Month. So are you anywhere aside from Facebook? I think you got a Patreon, correct?
Yeah, I have a Patreon, and that's kind of like right now the best way for people to kind of like support me, unless someone wants to sponsor me. Like I'm more than willing to have sponsors too. But like throughout the social, through the socials, I'm really trying to be more active on Facebook. I'm not gonna lie, that's not been my wheelhouse in the past, but I'm really trying to build the Facebook page up. But I've been pretty active on X, and then I've branched off into Blue Sky as well, one of the X alternatives. I don't understand the analytics of it all, but I have a presence on TikTok as well. So yeah, the Facebook and TikTok are both MLW Con-Fusion, all one word. The other socials tend to be under my the Nova of Cast moniker, which is up here on the screen as well. But like Twitter and Blue Sky are like kind of where you can get my random wrestling thoughts, and just rando thoughts in general. But like if I happen to be watching something, like I'll kind of like live tweet chunks of it, or if there's some news that's going around the interwebs, like I'll just kind of snark on it as well. But I do try to keep at least the Facebook strictly kind of like the podcast related. Like if you want to find out like what's going on in my podcasting realm, whether it's MLW Con-Fusion, guest appearances on such as this show, or my contributing work with the Urban Wrestling Network, like that's where you're going to find all that stuff in a good hub without necessarily having to listen to all my other brainworms go at it.
All right, well, no, that's amazing that you're able to kind of keep it all consistent on one social media platform. I think that's what some of us struggle with. We want to post everything on every platform, but for you to kind of separate that out, that's really cool. I may steal that from you. I'm kidding.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert on it, because like there's like Instagram, I'm useless, and like I said, I don't understand the analytics for things, and I don't have a great use of for the YouTube. Like my YouTube channel is all over the place, so I plug it for things, but like it's not just wrestling. Like I have random episodes of Con-Fusion up there, but it's actually like my other weird side projects too, where like I pretend to have like a cooking show like once every like 3 months, and I make stupid things and then upset my wife because I've wrecked the kitchen, or I've made something that's functionally inedible, because why would you do things like that? So like I plug the YouTube, but it's not like my big like, oh, this is where you should go for the podcast. No, don't go to the YouTube for MLW Con-Fusion. Totally go there and support me and check out the stuff there too. That's also at the Nova Cast, but like you're not necessarily going to, that's not like, if you like me for my wrestling insight, YouTube is not the place to go, or at least for my channel. Again, like I'm gonna continuously like plug my other ventures such as the Urban Wrestling Network, and that they're mostly on YouTube. So like I talk wrestling for them as well, grace people with my presence. We're usually have a face for radio.
Okay, so is Urban Wrestling Network the only one that you work with aside from your own thing you got going on?
Yeah, they are my primary or I'm the primary contributor for that. They've branched out all over the place in the past, but right now they're mostly focused on MLW and the NWA, and then I usually contribute to the MLW portion of their group.
Now, see, I didn't know that. Now we all know something new. I'm going to have to check that out. Chris Zach he said, "What's up, fellas? MLW Con-Fusion, fun show. Rob's a good dude." Thank you, Chris, for those kind words. I think we're going to have him on.
The Wizard.
Yeah, we're going to have him on for, I think, Card Subject to Change. Is that Chris's?
Yeah, Card Subject to Change. Do good work, those guys.
Yeah, we're going to have them on later in the month or middle of the month, so that's going to be pretty cool. But see. Oh, we've already went all through those questions. Holy moly. You're like me, you're a fast talker.
Oh, no, you get me go. Like, I can talk a lot. You get me going, and I might not stop, which is both good and bad. But
I want your thoughts on this Contra unit. What's your thoughts on them? I mean, that's probably my favorite group that came out of MLW.
I am very interested in to see where they're going. Like right now, they've done a good job. MLW with the Contra has done a very good job, we'll call it, at making them maybe viral is not the good word, but they've done very well at promoting like the imagery of Contra since Contra's the return of Mads Kruger specifically.
Yep.
But right now, I'm hopeful for the future, but right now it's been mostly Mads Kruger and the Nameless Schools, aka the Sendai Death Squad, and so I'm really hoping that we get like a full-on new Contra unit. If we're not going to bring back the OG group, at least have Mads Kruger and then a batch of named henchmen or named underlings. I know they just brought back, as of the last taping at War Chamber, they brought back a Koro Kwan, so they at least have one more full named member of the group. But I'm hoping just to see more names get involved with it, because they're already becoming a big deal. Kruger has shown already that he's a monster, and again they functionally beheaded, or at least in terms of imagery, beheaded Jacob Fatu before sending him out of the promotion. And then at the end of War Chamber, the last image we saw was the black flag of Contra hanging from the cage. So I'm a fan of all this chaos. I've been a big supporter of Contra unit overall, but again, I'm really hoping to see a solid core of individuals rather than just a bunch of nameless schools running around causing chaos. I want to see guys that I can become emotionally invested in,
right,
just to take it to the future.
Right. Whenever I first started is whenever Jacob Fatu first got into it. That's what I remember. And I followed them a little bit. Then I seen they came back recently, and I was like, oh, this is interesting now. What are they going to do here? And I agree with you. They need to have a kind of like a collective instead of having nameless, not really nameless, but bodies. Have an actual consistent unit, then, just feed people bodies like the babyface bodies or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I think the only consistent member for me that I can remember was Jacob Fatu. And then, like you said, they figuratively, they didn't really do it. They beheaded.
Yeah, they held him down. Somebody even acted as a chopping block, laid down, and they, for those of you who missed it, laid Jacob Fatu over one of they call them the Sendai Death Squad, and Kruger's primary weapon is a Bakle club, and which looks like a shillelagh, and they brought it down straight onto Fatu's head, and so it wasn't a beheading, obviously, but image wise, that's what kind of that brought up, was almost like a public execution for that. Right. And so they came back with a vengeance, which you got to make a statement if you're coming back, especially if you've been out of the spotlight, at least in MLW, out of the spotlight for I believe 2 years.
Who else would you do you want to highlight from MLW? One of your favorites, personal favorites.
I can't get enough of Filthy Tom Lawler. I was so excited to see him come back to the company a handful of months ago. Like, yes, I don't always have nice things to say about the group he's joined, the World Titan Federation, but Tom Lawler is bringing his A game to it, and he's just like he can go in the ring. Like he obviously has a legit MMA background. He knows how to work the crowd. So like he can be weird and goofy in his promos because he can back it up in the ring and take it, and stretch you in any direction he sees fit. So I will never, never turn down the opportunity to, promote my love of Filthy Tom as well. We did talk about Satoshi Kojima. I was a fan of his work. I was really hoping, and it's disappointed me to see, but I've never gotten confirmation that he's not part of MLW anymore. But I was really excited to see that O'Shea Edwards at least was signed to them. But he's only had like two matches for MLW, and then they haven't used him. But I really liked his work outside of MLW, especially in Enjoy. And I'm keeping an eye on WTF's Joshua Bishop. Been a fan of his work also Enjoy Wrestling as well. And at War Chamber, he's finally kind of gotten the opportunity to show like what he can do in the ring with his like pure power game and just like sheer intensity. So I'm if he sticks around, I can see big things coming from him as well.
Oh, yeah, that's really cool. Have you thought about doing like going back to the beginning to the early 2000s and doing coverage for the history of MLW possibly?
I've kind of indirectly done like not as a proper retrospective, but as part of the pandemic, MLW actually like broke into the vault and started showing episodes of the original Underground, their first television program from back of like 2003, 2004. So I kind of like got to under the Confusion banner, like relive and go over the old shows and just see who come through the door. And it was really kind of neat at times. And actually that's kind of like got me how do I want to phrase it? Like got me in contact with Crowbar, Devin Storm. That's how we end up like not that we're tight or anything, but like we first connected on Twitter over that was through the old Underground because he showed up, and like I went on social media and I snarked because they didn't seem to like for that old episode they didn't seem to know what they wanted to call him. Like his announced name was Devin Storm. His ring graphic called him Crowbar, which is the name he's best known for, right. and then like Joey Styles was just all over the place. They like that he wants to be called the Crowbar Devin Storm, and it was really the Crowbar, and then like they would just let it slip that he was Tempest in early TNA as well. So like he had like 3 names over the course of one match. And so like I snarked on social media. I'm like, hey man, like I do an MLW podcast. I just saw you on Underground. What do I call you? Just not thinking that he would even notice it because the vacuum chamber that is the internet wrestling community. And like he actually responded to the tweet and actually responded earnestly to it. Like he ignored like any of the snark I had and just answered like, no man, I wrestled for the love of the game, and it's basically as long as you paid me well, they could have called me whatever they wanted to. And I'm like, props to that man. And then props for bothering to answer. And so like we kind of like communicated back and forth like since then, usually over old wrestling clips of him because he's a big proponent of like showing the stuff that he's done while like giving it the benefit of having the benefit of hindsight while doing it, which did eventually lead him to being able to come on the Con-Fusion podcast last year. So that was like really awesome, like for me as a fan, just to have like that experience in general, just coming basically from like doing a rewatch of old shows and then being snarky on the internet, and all of a sudden now I get to interview the guy, and it was awesome because he's a really cool guy.
He seems cool. Like that's why I like again about MLW. Even back then, they took people like him and was able to showcase them and what they can do in ring, aside from what we've seen in WCW or in TNA, because a lot of those guys were kind of in limbo still, and he was one of those guys, and MLW was able to kind of highlight them in a way, and that's what I like about it.
Oh, and like I go like especially in urban wrestling, I say it ad nauseum, is that Court Bauer, the owner of MLW, is very good at rehab projects. Like that seems like it seems to be his specialty in the wrestling world, is like take these guys who other companies like couldn't use correctly or never quite got the chance to do it, or just or the companies were ignoring them, or like the wrestlers themselves had a reputation for having bad attitudes, and like he would come in, get his hands on them, and like he would be able to help like take them to the next level, or at least get them some like notoriety that they may have missed out on because of alleged backstage issues. Because I look at like he's helped rehab to a lesser extent, like Low Key. Like like for all the horror stories that you hear about Low Key, like you don't hear those stories coming out of MLW, that like, and or he's taken the guys like Swerve Strickland, like when Swerve was in his in between kind of like phase of like he just finished up being Kill Shot, but he really hadn't full on evolved into Swerve yet. Like Court Bauer like gave him the ball to run with it for a bit without the mask and just let him go before WWE picked him up. And then of course, like we see where he's at now, absolutely killing it in AEW. So like MLW has been kind of like a good like place to, take that next step, be a stepping stone to either bigger or better things, or like if things haven't gone well, like here, MLW's been a good spot for you to just like revamp yourself, or just take a minute to just breathe and get some work in.
Yeah, I remember Swerve when he was Shane Strickland. That's how I know it, because he used to wrestle in the Tennessee Independents a lot too. So that's pretty cool. But we are 2 minutes out. We're going to keep it about 30 minutes. We went over last night thanks to a certain friend of the Squared Circle talking his head off. But I want to say thank you again for being part of the Podcasters Appreciation Month. It really has been fun. Is there any social medias aside from the Facebook page? I know you primarily want to focus on that, but is there any other social media outlets you want people to go and check out and subscribe to and like and follow?
Of course, as I said, the Facebook is the best place to go for the podcast in general. If you think you need to hear my brainworms and kind of some of the plugs of some of my other projects, or just hear my thoughts of whatever's going on in the realm of wrestling at the time, X/Twitter and Blue Sky are the way to go for that. But like Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky are kind of like the big places for you to find me on the internet.
All right, awesome. So everybody that's watching this, fans of the Joe Monroe Show, go check out MLW Con-Fusion. Even if you don't like professional wrestling, still go check them out. I urge you to. But with that being said, Rob, thank you again, my friend, for coming on, being a part of the Podcasters Appreciation Month. I was happy we'll be able to get to highlight your show, and maybe I'll definitely check out the older episodes that you told me, especially with Crowbar. But until next time tomorrow, I think we're going to have our friends from Wrestling from the 313, Mike D, in the house tomorrow night. And I just want to say good night and always support professional wrestling, and take care, everybody.